Before we go deep into that, I want to talk about selectors for a bit more and go through a few more examples. Go ahead and jump to your module directory and open up the fourth step, which is called using jQuery selectors. Go ahead and copy this code and paste it over the code that's currently in your interact.js file. Okay, now this structure is similar to our previous file. We have our function wrapper here, our document ready wrapper here. And then what we're doing is setting a variable called content, and we're just setting it to blank. And then we have a number of examples, and then we're ending it all with an alert call, and we're passing the content to it. So basically what we're doing is filling in this content with these examples. Okay, we have our first example, which is uncommented. What we're doing here is using the jQuery object as the $, and we're passing it a selector. This selector is pretty similar to our previous example, which was simply h1, but we're further specifying which h1 we want by adding an ID tag to it. And we specify the ID tag with the hash symbol here. And so specifically what we're looking for is an h1 tag with an ID of site-name. And what we're doing is grabbing the HTML from inside of that using the HTML method. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save this, and then I'm going to jump back to the browser, and I'm going to go to the home page. Now here we have a new alert with some new text in here, and this is looking for the h1 tag, again with the site name ID, which corresponds to this right here, which is the actual site name of the site. And sure enough, it says loc.d7.scratch, which is what we see in the heading. So that seems to be working just fine. Okay, let's take a look at the next example. I'm going to go ahead and uncomment this section here. In this one, we're selecting the A tag, but we're using the dot symbol to delineate a class that this tag should have. So we're looking for A tags that have a class of active. Now it could have other classes as well. That doesn't matter, it just has to include this one as part of those classes. And then we're grabbing the HTML from this. Note that in situations where the jQuery object has multiple matches, in this case multiple A tags with the active class, it will pull the first one for certain methods. And for the HTML method, it will just pick the first item that was a match for this selector and run this method on it. And because we're just resetting this content variable, it overrides previous examples, so we don't need to comment those out as we go through. I'm going to go ahead and save this. Let's jump back to the browser and refresh the page. Okay, so now we see the text home, which corresponds to the A active, which we would see here. Let's go ahead and inspect this element and just make sure that this is the one that we're looking at. Okay, sure enough, we see here we have an A with a class of active, and its text is home. Okay, let's check out our next example. I'm going to go ahead and comment this out. Now in this example, what we're doing is using a nested selector, and we do that by using a space. So what we're saying here in plain English is that we want to select a span tag that's inside of an h1 tag. It doesn't necessarily have to be directly inside the h1 tag. It could be inside of a div inside of an h1 tag. It just has to be somewhere inside of that. Note that while we just have two tags here, we could further nest this. So it could be a div tag inside of a span tag, inside of a p tag, inside of an h1 tag, for example. Let's go ahead and save this and jump back to the browser and refresh. So now we see our code inside of that h1 span tag. Let's go ahead and inspect this again just to make sure that we're getting the right code. Okay, down here in our Firebug panel, we see we are in a span tag inside of an h1 tag. And note that the span is wrapped in an A tag, but we're still getting this text here that's in the span tag. Okay, let's take a look at the next example. I'm going to go ahead and comment out this one. In this example, we're using a attribute as a selector. So this first part is the tag itself, input. And what we're doing is further narrowing down which inputs we're going to select by selecting ones that have a type of text. Now, this type here is the attribute, and text is the value of the attribute. So for example, we could use ID here if we wanted another way to use the ID as a selector or class, but we could also use things like rel or href for A tags. So this will look for just text inputs inside of our code, and we're using val to pull the value of that text input. So if something has been typed into that input, it will display that. Let's go ahead and save this. And I'm going to jump back to the browser and close Firebug here. So now the only text input on this page is our search box right here. So what I'm going to do is fill this in with some text. And then when I refresh the page, the way my browser works is that anything I type in before a refresh gets added back into the text input on refresh. So when I refresh this, it should throw up an alert that says whatever the value of this is. In this case, just some gobbledygook. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh the page. And sure enough, we have our alert that matches the same text that's inside of here. Okay. I'm going to jump back to the code. And I'm going to comment out the next one. This one uses a text selector. So sometimes we'll want to select certain elements that have particular text in them. And that's what this does. So what this says is that we're looking for p tags, paragraph tags, and then we're using the colon and contains as a modifier here, and then we're passing of the text that we're looking for. So this will return a jQuery object that contains any paragraph tags that have the word PNEUM in it. Now, if you're working on a site where you have some content that you've already created, you may want to replace this out for an example with a word that you know exists on the page. And then what we're doing is using HTML to return the HTML content of this p tag. Let's go ahead and save this. I'm going to jump back to the browser. Now, that word is found right here in this paragraph. So this entire paragraph should display in the alert when we refresh the page. And sure enough, here it is. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at one more example of selectors. I'm going to go ahead and comment this out. So what we're doing here is chaining the jQuery object to do a couple of things with it. And we're using a find method in order to find a piece of content that exists inside of another piece of content. Now this is pretty much identical to what you see right up here, but there are use cases where using this find method is important. So I just wanted to go ahead and demonstrate that. So we're using the h1 selector, and then we're running the find method, and we pass it the same kind of selector that we would pass the jQuery object. And this will search anything inside of an h1 tag. And then we're returning the HTML from this span. So we should just get our site title just like we did in this example up here. I'm going to go ahead and save this and jump back to the browser and refresh. And sure enough, we get our site title again in the alert.